This is just Julian coming out of his shell a little bit here, because you were quoted as saying that teams might be a little bit scared of Miami with Leo coming back. And I have to say that does sound like a pretty legitimate thing to say, considering you're on a tear without Leo Messi. Do you want to elaborate on those comments at all? Are they being taken out of context?
Well, no, they're not really. I mean, I honestly just spoke the truth. I feel like, in that moment, it's just like, I think it was after Chicago where they asked me after this past weekend, the question at the end of it, and he's like, "Hey, so now you're gonna get Leo Messi back. What's gonna happen?" It's just like, I mean, for me, it's like, well, I feel like it would instill fear in me if I was on a different team, So
yeah. Welcome back to the Player Manager Podcast. Did you forget about us? I'm Zealand Shannon, back again with your favorite MLS midfielder, or should I say forward, or should I say right back, soon to be goalkeeper, Julian Gressel, back together again after a short, late summer break, and it is just excellent to see you. You're particularly well lit, as people will see on the Instagram today, getting ready for what's going to be a big announcement coming up soon. But it really is. It's great to see you. I've been missing a part of my life.
Yes, I feel like it's been a long time, so I'm excited to be back here. You've been up to a lot of things, so I'm excited to talk about that. But you hinted at the announcement. I'm really excited for that next week. That'll be cool. We'll tease that later, I think, a little bit more. But yeah, it's been a good few weeks for me. How are you doing?
Oh, great. I got to spend some time in England. It was 65 Fahrenheit and raining every day, so really kept up appearances.
Beautiful summer.
Yeah, no, it's just absolutely delightful. But I will say, over the course of this break, I rafted the Grand Canyon. Now, that was very cool. Is it relevant to anything we're going to talk about the rest of the day? No. But I managed to do that and not get a sunburn. So this is just a giant advertisement for the sunscreen that I happen to be using. I've already forgotten the name of it. So that's probably good. We do have the announcement, though, that we're all very excited about in this player manager universe. We're working very hard to make sure that it comes out. And we are going to talk about it because we're good podcasters at the end of this podcast. We have a bunch of other important things to talk about first, including the fact that Inter Miami are absolutely on a tear. Obviously, you already know that, Julian. I'm just telling everybody else. And clear favorites to pick up the Supporters Shield, going for a points record and all of that. And Lionel Messi hasn't even been playing for a while. But we do have a World Cup to talk about. And no, you didn't accidentally miss the men's or women's World Cup. I'm talking about the Football Manager World Cup. Some would say the nerdiest World Cup of all time, because that was what I was up to in England, in beautiful, rainy Liverpool for an entire week. Just give me your initial reaction, Julian, to the fact that is a real thing. Just get it out of your system. The fact that there's a Football Manager World Cup officially within FIFA's umbrella.
Within FIFA's umbrella, that's actually really cool, I think. But when I heard about it, I was like, oh yeah, I can make fun of this all day long. But at the same time, I feel like with what is happening in esports and e-gaming and everything, this is something that was always going to happen. And I feel like you've probably wanted this to happen for a long time, and this is right up your alley. I know this. I know you didn't participate. I'm not sure exactly why.
Sad American
you didn't participate. Yeah, but I think you can maybe rant at that a little bit. But I absolutely have no idea how something like that would work. So can you just give me the little rundown of how that kind of played out, I guess, for you?
Right. So it is the first one ever. Right, at the first one that's ever been run, the first competitive Football Manager event that involved actual football associations from around the world. And they basically sent out an invite to all of the countries where there is a large number of, they're not sending this to the Solomon Islands or anything, no offense to the Solomon Islands, right? But they sent it out to football associations in areas where a lot of people play Football Manager, basically. Some turned them down, like the U.S., and said, we're busy, we got other stuff, we're hiring a coach potentially, which of course we're going to talk about later in this episode as well. And others said yes. 19 countries said yes. I don't have any way to even guess how many that they asked, but I can't imagine it was too many more than that. And they ended up with 20 participating teams, just for a nice round number, because they invited a second team from the host nation, which was England. Yeah. They divided those 20 teams into 4 groups, and each of those 4 groups was given a team. And I actually love this, Julian. I want to get your thoughts, because in Football Manager, you don't actually play the matches, you just coach a specific team. So it's very hard. It's usually a single player game to turn it into a competition. But each group got a team. So like Group A got a team in Japan, some random team called Yokohama Marinos. It's actually the team Ange Postecoglou managed back in the day. The next group got Brighton. Group after that got Sporting. And the fourth group got Dinamo Zagreb. And
Okay.
each team in each of those groups, you just had to manage them for 3 seasons.
Okay.
That was it. And the more cups you won, the farther you got in the cups, the farther you got in the Champions League, the better you finished in the league, the more points you got. So the team that won each group and made it to the finals just did better with the exact same team in the exact same circumstances over 3 years. I think it was the best thing I'd ever heard to test, how good you are at Football Manager, because it removes a lot of the variables. You're all starting with the same team at the same time.
Gotcha. So, all right. So you kind of indirectly play against each other.
You do. You're in your own universe, but you're competing to do better with the same team.
Okay.
Relative to the other countries in your group. And then if you win your group, you go to this final day where they tried to turn it into this giant esports thing. And it's like a fantasy draft versus mode, championship, basically. Home and away semifinals, home and away in the final. And Indonesia won, which was awesome. The Indonesian community for football and Football Manager and everything is massive, but they don't get a chance to, flex and shout very often because they're still trying to build up their team and everything. And so they were, when I tell you the YouTube streams, combined is like 10, 15,000 people from the Indonesian channel and in kind of the main broadcast and everything else. It was, over 50% Indonesian in the chat total over for parts of the tournament. And obviously, particularly for the final. It was. They were home online, right? Which was really ironic because Indonesia actually played England in the semifinals, so they were away in the venue and then they were home online. It was great contrast, but FIFA actually did a really, really great job with it, which is an uncomfortable position for me because I spend a lot of my time just dumping on FIFA in one way or another for one decision they make or another decision they make as is the way. But they actually did a fabulous job with it. And it was a tight, 4 or 5 days. And then the after party nearly ended me. So it was all just an A+ experience all around. Yeah.
So I'm still a little bit confused. I get the tournament and everything. I'm confused at why you were there. You didn't participate.
Right.
So were you like commentating for like live streams or were you kind of just like an expert that wasn't participating? Kind of
basically, they had their broadcast team and they brought in some other Football Manager YouTubers for that. Okay. But they just brought me there and said, basically, do whatever you want. So what I did, because they played 1 season per day. So it was like you had those 3 seasons. It was over 3 days. So each day you had to play 1 season. So I just did, if you ever watch NFL, I just did Chris Hansen Red Zone.
Oh my goodness. It's the other. Oh, it's a goal. Oh my goodness. In the 92nd minute, it's a goal for Patum, and they have to overturn a multi-goal deficit at home. Patum with 3 goals in 4 shots. But it is another challenge for Mohamed Alem. He has to win this Asian Champions League to keep himself in it.
Just jumping between, because they're all streaming to the official site. Like that's how they'd broadcast it. And so I'm just jumping. Oh, we got a big cup final over here. Oh, crazy transfer over here. And these guys are so good at Football Manager. By year 3, we had David De Gea was playing in Japan. We had Lamine Yamal playing for Dinamo Zagreb. Like the signings that these guys were able to pull off just with the things they knew about the game. We had, because they didn't know not to outlaw installments, which is like deferring transfers into future payments. So we had a Brighton team spending 1.3 billion in the final transfer window because they were just putting it all in installments. Like they were just signing the best team. That's the sort of thing that happens when it's the first tournament and everybody's figuring it out. But it was, really funny. And the guys were really good at FM. I was watching it going, I'd get my butt kicked if I tried to play against them without months of practice. I was concerned. Like, obviously, when you hear Football Manager, if you know what the game is and you're like, oh, Football Manager, esports or whatever, how does that make any sense? Because there's so much RNG. Sometimes it's like playing poker. Sometimes you set everything right. You know this. You played the game. Yeah. Luis Suarez, I'm sure, knows this. All the guys that play it, Antoine Griezmann and all them. So you do everything right, and then you just, your center back's leg falls apart in the 5th minute, and you give up a corner in the 90th minute, and the whole game is ruined. But my concern was there wouldn't be enough of a skill gap, but there really was. The best few teams were so significantly better than these other incredible nerds. I mean, on my level of nerdiness, that it really that. I think it is a viable competitive sport now. Not to mention the fact that it was just really fun doing that red zone for 3 days, because you're just watching people get their heart broken over and over again every 5 minutes. Just somebody blows a Croatian Cup match and it's like ruins their tournament. And you're just sitting there with popcorn,
Would you have rather played in it, though?
I think when I first got there and saw, I mean, you can relate to this experience, but for me, it was perhaps even more surprising. Like the first time I showed up to, it's probably like you walking into US camp, where I walked by for you, it would have been walking by like all the people in the official US gear or whatever, but I walked by the Turkish delegation while I was picking up my badge. Right. And I'm thinking this is just going to be like another streamer thing. I've been to a million of these before. And I walk by, 5 very official looking Turkish dudes that, I mean, they are all business. Right. And it's the manager and like the coach and they have they brought like an analyst to watch the other streams and be like, hey, this is what, the other team is doing. And they're all fitted in, the official gear. They've got in every single team had an official suit. They had an official like tracksuit and kind of thing that you could wear while you were playing from their esports teams, from Malaysia to Lithuania, who were, both in the turn. They all had their swag, for lack of a better term. When I saw that, I was like, damn, I would have loved to have been just swagged out. Yeah, just like decked out in my US stuff. Like actually, because I knew it was the FM World Cup, but I never thought about it as, oh, this is like USFA or USSF. Like this is representing the country on an official level, capacity wise. So I was definitely wishing that I was playing then, but I think in hindsight, 1, I would have gotten rocked. I would have not done well. And 2, I think that a lot more people were able to enjoy the tournament because I was doing that whip around show. So I think it probably helped grow the tournament, so there would be more in the future. I think it was good that I wasn't playing. It was like taking your vitamins, though. It wasn't something that I was excited about initially.
Okay, sounds good. Well, get USSF to figure it out for next year, and then, or is there one every year?
They still haven't announced. This was the test, basically.
Okay.
I think they're compiling, how many interactions they got or whatever they use to measure if it's viable or not, and then they'll decide if they're going to do it again. But if they do it again, I've now done the whip around thing once, and I would definitely love to play. So my coordinated pressure campaign on the USSF begins promptly.
Right. Get practicing.
Yeah, I know. But I say that now, but it's the same thing as the marathon training. I'll just have to spend months testing tactics, and I'll just be pulling what's left of my hair out. It's going to be fantastic. But as much as I'm going to fail at that, we can talk about something that you are succeeding at instead. Inter Miami. We teased it earlier, but since exiting the Leagues Cup, which obviously was sad, you guys have won your last 2 MLS matches, 4 wins in the last 4 MLS matches, and you've opened up an 8-point lead on Cincinnati on 58 points.
Suarez touches it along. Brilliant here for Miami. Back for Luis Suarez, and what a save from Brady. But it went in. Slip through for Suarez. Good ball from Gomez. Luis Suarez, and he tucks it away. That one is his. Alba takes it on the first time, and it's Suarez for his second of the night. And Ruiz sending Campana on his way. Taylor to his left. Campana finding Taylor. Good night. 4-1.
This has obviously been an absolutely ridiculous season so far, and so much so that you're on pace, according to the computer projections, to beat the single season points record from the New England Revolution, which is 73, or projected to get 74. Just hearing all of that, what's your reaction? Do you feel like it has been that good of a season, or is there like a lot more room to grow into?
Well, let's not talk about the points record. We don't want to jinx ourselves here, but
sorry,
no,
hey, I brought it up. That was my fault. You know who to blame.
I've gotten asked about it now a few times, so I feel like if it happened, it already happened before. But honestly, it feels like a really good season. It feels like a really good season from years past that, was a very close and very good year that I had in Atlanta in 2018 with the same coaching staff, but for some reason, like it's funny because there's such high expectations on our team and within our locker room that like it doesn't necessarily sink in, or it doesn't like you don't really feel it as much that you're winning the supporter shield, that you're close to a points record or you have a chance for it. It's just like expected, is probably the good word. And that obviously goes to one, I think, what the club has done in terms of getting the players in, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not obviously, we're talking about the big four and what they've done in their careers, and they're accustomed to this, right? That's their standard. But you have a whole other 26 or 24 other guys that you have to kind of pull in that direction as well, So you talk about the roster build in that sense, and then I think when I think about it right now, what kind of sticks out is that we've kind of done it without Leo mostly, especially as of late, and that we've been able to withstand all these question marks that were thrown at us, and that it was Copa America, that was the Olympics, all that type of stuff. And now added to that, there was an injury to the best player in the world, and by far in this league. So, we've done it with a striker that at the beginning of the season wasn't, had one knee, and couldn't even walk. Like, so, and he's been absolutely on fire, and he's been playing incredible, for us. And so it really speaks, one, I think, to the whole roster, and two, to kind of, the guys, just us kind of expecting it, and us going out there and doing it no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what's thrown at us. So it feels like a really good season, and hopefully we can, at the end of the year, top it off by now, getting the guy Leo back on the field eventually, and kind of finishing the season strong, where we are hopefully beating that 73 point season and winning the Supporters Shield. And then obviously the big goal is MLS Cup, and that's what we want to win. So if I had to choose now, I'd take 72 points at MLS Cup.
Well, you anticipated one of my two questions, but you knew I was going to ask about the other thing too. So the last time we potted, Messi was just down with that ankle injury, and he's still out with the ankle injury. What have you seen around the team? Like, how close might he be to coming back? Is he out there, striping 30-yard free kicks again, or is he still kind of limping around?
He's not really limping anymore. I mean, there's been, obviously he's been part of team training. I think that's been well reported. I think it was a little bit too early, that Chicago game, for him. I think he ultimately made the decision to just give it another couple of weeks, because now we obviously have the international break and he's not going to the national team. So just to be a little bit safe there. But I expect him to be part of the team, in this next game. I think it's something that is realistic, where we'll have like 2 weeks now of full training. And, at times I think he's still a little bit limited, obviously, where I think they're being cautious with him, and depending on a lot how he feels on a daily basis. So it's still somewhat day to day, I want to say, but he's definitely, been in team trainings, been part of the group more on the field, and it's nice. It's nice to have him back. It's nice to have him kind of be part of the team, and just seeing him back out there, because it's Leo Messi. It's if you can add a guy like that after what we've done over the past month or 2 months, and it's certainly going to be an interesting kind of finish to the end here.
Is there something of, I mean, this is something that would cross my mind if I was a coach or a general manager, right? That they don't want to rush him back because they don't need to. Like, he doesn't need to come back necessarily, and he might not even need to come back until even later in the season, because you guys are doing really well without him. He's like he's the ace in the hole, right? He's the golden bullet in the chamber. But you guys, you're top of the league without him. Is that something that's kind of been discussed, or is an understanding kind of going around where it's like, yeah, well, we don't need to rush him back. He can come back when he's fully ready?
Yeah, maybe that played a little bit of a role back maybe the last couple of weeks, but I don't I don't think it will now moving forward. I think when he's ready to play, he's going to be ready to play, and he wants to play. I think that's what it's going to come down to, kind of him feeling well enough to be out there, feeling 100%, and then he'll be out there. There's no reason for us to, I think, rest guys or take it easy, because that's usually when things happen, in my opinion, when you don't go 100% and when you kind of take your foot off the gas a little bit. So like I said, we have the expectation to finish, yes, number 1 Supporter Shield, and honestly, I'm happy that single season points record is still there for us to play for, because that means we really got a shot at history here, and we have something to play for these last few games where we're in the playoffs, and eventually we'll hopefully clinch a home game, and we'll maybe clinch a Supporter Shield, hopefully a couple of games early. But there's some teams that have to make up some games, so it might be tight till the end. And but again, we can't really let our foot off the gas. We want to get Leo back on the field, and integrate him again, get him match fit, right, for the playoffs as well, because there's a difference between him training and him playing a 90-minute match, and it's different intensities and all of that. So there's certainly goals to be achieved, and things that we want to do over the course of the next, I don't know how many games are left, 6 or 7, but that, and then we'll hopefully, like I said, I think finish strong and then be feeling really well for the playoffs.
7. I got it for you.
7.
So I've been crunching the numbers, my notoriously bad math skills. You can double check here. You've got 7 matches left, which could give you a total of 21 points. You need 16 to break the record. So that's basically the run-in that's framed up. And you're talking about teams with points in hand. It is worth mentioning, obviously. The Columbus, the team that knocked you out of the Leagues Cup, the team that obviously went on to win it, they are 2 matches in hand. And if they win both of those, which is obviously an if, they would be 4 points off. So, Julian's not just providing lip service here to the people that are listening to this. It is obviously not, it's nowhere near clinched that top spot in the conference, which just shows how impressive Columbus has been this season.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what a great team. I think, unfortunately, they beat us in the Leagues Cup, and we exited there. But for them then to go on and win the Leagues Cup, and now even having picked up all the points in MLS and not really missing a beat there, speaks to obviously their squad and everything, and they'll be dangerous. I think, they'll be dangerous come the playoff time. That's why, we want them coming to Miami instead of us having to go to Columbus when the playoffs are there. That's where we want to finish above them, and then hopefully have a matchup in Miami in the playoffs at some point.
And talking about that potential matchup with Columbus, you also do have a game left with Columbus on October 2nd that I'm sure we are going to discuss at length on this podcast. But I just have to bring this up because this just feels, I don't want to say out of character, but this is just Julian coming out of his shell a little bit here. Because you were quoted as saying that teams might be a little bit scared of Miami with Leo coming back. And I have to say that does sound like a pretty legitimate thing to say, considering you're on a tear without Leo Messi. But do you want to elaborate on those comments at all? Are they being taken out of context?
Well, no, they're not really. I mean, I honestly just spoke the truth. I feel like, in that moment, it's just like, okay, we've done all the things. I think it was after Chicago where they asked me after this past weekend, where, a comfortable win. I think we were up 3-0, and then they scored 1 and we scored 1 late. So 4-1 win. I want to say pretty comfortable. And then you get, the question at the end of it, and he's like, hey, so now you're going to get Leo Messi back. What's going to happen? It's just like, I mean, for me, it's like, well, you add such a player to a team that's already doing, really, really well in terms of how we have been doing over the past month, then it just kind of, I feel like it would instill fear in me if I was on a different team, So
Yeah.
I do obviously know, and I have the feeling sometimes that we can give up easy goals, and we do kind of fall into this, this is going to be an easy day today, kind of mode at times, where then we make it almost tougher on ourselves. And that's something that we have to be aware of when the playoffs come around. But that's a discussion for later, I think. And that's something that maybe the last 3-4 games of the season really want to focus on and kind of get ready for the playoffs, because it's different. When, for example, you can't score a goal or you're having a tough time and you give up 1 or 2, and then one game can change the whole trajectory of the season in that moment. So it's really, kind of a thing that is just different, and we got to kind of be aware at times. But right now, I certainly feel good about where we're at. I feel good, like I said, about adding Leo back to this team currently, and being able to push even more.
Well, that is going to change, right, the way that things work, because as much as it is adding, like you said, the best player in the world to a team that's already top of the conference, it does change things. And maybe for no one more than you. Like, what's going to change for you as Leo Messi comes back and you kind of get into that role of being his shadow again, which you've basically been playing Messi light at times while he's been gone.
I appreciate it, but I don't know. I mean, we'll see. And I've kind of said this all along. Tata hasn't come up to me and been like, "Hey, now Leo's back, so now we're going to do this and this." I think it hasn't really been like that. It's just been, he's kind of plugged me along the way. I've played left, like you said in the intro. I feel like everywhere, but Leo was out, and I knew that Leo was going to be at the Copa America. I knew I was going to have to play right winger at times, and I did that. And now he was hurt, and but then Matias Rojas played there a little bit, and I played more in the midfield. So there's different games that provide different scenarios where I will be put in different spots and different roles, and whatever role is asked of me, I'll try and take that on as best as I can, and that is now obviously with Leo coming back, that might change. It might be where I only get to play or I get to play 30 minutes as a right winger or whatever, or and then the rest of the game in the midfield, or even coming off the bench at times. I don't know, we'll just kind of see. So I'm fully on board with team first and kind of what we want to do towards the end of the year, that being the points record, and then obviously MLS Cup is the big thing. I mean, just look at last year, kind of how I've adapted my role coming into the playoffs in terms of, making an impact more off the bench and stuff like that. So it's really, I feel like any role that I'm going to play, I've kind of seen before. So I'm all positive in any type of way.
Hard not to be positive when the team is cooking as much as it is. And we are going to, yeah. Believe it or not, winning doesn't suck sometimes.
Yes.
The next game is September 14th for those listening that maybe aren't part of that Inter Miami coalition against Philadelphia, the international break, which I know, gasp, an international break that MLS is actually taking. Going another 10 days. You have like plans for that time? Do you get a few days off or something? I don't know how this works.
We did over the past weekend. We had Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Now, first day back was today is Wednesday, so first day back was today, and then we get the weekend off again. So, but we've just made a decision to just stay at home as a family.
Take it easy, maybe.
Yeah, we might have a nice little cookout here at the house or something over the weekend. Maybe start with having some people and some guys over for football. For the first football Sunday, and just kind of hanging out, taking it easy. This is not the time, I think, to take big vacations. It's not the time where you need a break. For me, mentally right now, I feel really good. I feel like I'm in a place of like, all right, this is time to really, hunker down and like get serious about what we want to do over the course of the next 2 months, because that's all that's left. 3 months, hopefully, going to December. So, that's kind of what we want to do and what we want to achieve over the next quarter of a year. So not the time for vacation, and then vacation can come after you win the cup again.
Yeah. Then you can take the cup on vacation. So it works. I do love how maybe it's your professional athlete mentality or whatever. You have it like you have everything always so planned out. It's like, no, this part of the season we don't take vacation.
Well, it's also the family life is also kind of like, we're just getting back into a routine. My daughter just started school again. Summer is finally over, where, she's kind of back in school, and we have all these activities. She started soccer now, for example. Like, we kind of have every day we have something going on. So then over the weekend, when the weekend's here, we're like, don't really need to rush out of here. We can also kind of just enjoy the nicer weather here, which, we don't need to go chase the sun,
Yeah, true.
like the people in England need to do. But so it's something that, we kind of just try and take it easy at times.
No, and that, of course, I'll throw myself into this group of people that just always forget the professional athletes have non-professional athlete things on the table, like a kid starting school and maybe has a soccer game on the weekend that you might want to watch. On a side note, can't wait to catch younger Gressel on the women's national team at some point as a star fullback, midfielder, attacker.
U.S. or Germany, whichever she wants.
Yeah, you got to teach her more German first if she's going to make it on a German.
That's also happening. Trying to.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, I'd heard rumors that I think last time we talked about it, it was a bit of a struggle, but that the Rosetta Stone and speaking home quality of life.
It is a bit of a struggle, but I'm trying to teach my wife and my two daughters at the same time. So it's I can speak, but if they understand me is the other question. But no, we're trying.
Well, I mean, sometimes I guess that could be useful. Anytime you ever need to, you stub your toe or something, you just use the other language instead. But we'll add language tutor to your resume. There is something else we teased from the world of football that we wanted to be able to talk about today in our episode coming back here. And that is something that I think is actually a huge deal. I don't know how quickly or whatever it'll transition to MLS. This has to do with NWSL. It's the Women's Soccer League for those that are listening, perhaps not from the United States or just not familiar with it in general. The NWSL has its own players association, and they struck a new labor agreement with the league itself. And I'll just read out a couple of the things that this actually does, because it's kind of crazy. It eliminates the college draft, which for a long time FIFA's had a problem with the idea of the college draft. Now, obviously, you were drafted out of college, so it'd be interesting to hear what you think of that. I think it's a good thing, but obviously it's something that provided you with an opportunity in the first place. It establishes free agency for all players, which essentially means, I think, that if you're having a good season at Providence, somebody can just come in and sign you. It would be the flip side of that. And it prevents players from being traded without their consent. And of course, we've told your tales of woe from being traded in previous MLS clubs. That's a massive amount of change. What was your initial reaction when you saw that?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Oh man.
Yeah, it was that. I think it's something that we've asked for. A lot of these things I feel like all players want, I mean, you talk about, being traded without your consent. That is something that I've obviously been through in my career, where I got traded without consent and a world breaks down for you. I think I've talked about this on a different podcast, my previous podcast at length, and obviously in a lot of interviews as well. And when you eliminate that completely, that just gives you so much more peace of mind. I mean, that would eliminate, my wife's worries a lot. For example, like it's something where if you had to uproot your whole family without any notice or without any indication of what's happening, or without even being able to say yes or no, and that is something huge. And I think the draft, I mean, every good player from coming from college, I'm guessing, will be able to get picked up and enter through free agency. I know the amounts of money went up, obviously, and revenue sharing and all that type of stuff. So I feel like it's something really, really positive. Like I said, congratulations to the women, and hopefully we can adapt some of that moving forward into our CBA negotiations as well.
I think it's also one of those headlines that if you are Don Garber or if you're MLS, you're probably sitting there and looking at it and just going, damn it. Like what? Like what? Like, because they're going to look at that and they're just going to go, because at the very least, I don't think MLS is going to be able to get all of those concessions, because one, there are more viable top level men's leagues than there are viable top level women's leagues. It's gotten a lot better in the last 15, 20 years, but there's still like more of a concentration of talent in WSL than there is in MLS or any of the top 20 leagues in the world or whatever. Yeah. So they aren't going to have, MLSPA is not going to have the same bargaining power, but I think they also will be able to point at this and go, like,
Absolutely.
This is inevitable. This is going to happen at some point. We want it to happen now and so on. It also brings the US kind of into step with the rest of the world, because maybe if you're listening and you're just an avid MLS fan, obviously this is the way that it works everywhere else. You have to green light transfers if you want to leave, which is how teams like Manchester United get stuck holding gigantic contracts they gave to somebody, because that player, Harry Maguire or anybody else, can sit there and collect that contract. They don't have to leave, which is where this leaves a lot more power in the hands of the players. But I think this is definitely
let me jump in here because I think that's where there was an incentive from the NWSL, the league, because they're one of the top leagues in the world, right? And they don't want any other league. Like the English women's league is picking up more and more. Like you see more and more players leave here to go overseas, and all these types of the German Frauen Bundesliga, women's league is getting a lot bigger. So you want to kind of keep pace, right? And you want to be considered a top league, a league of choice in a sense, right? Where MLS has never been that. MLS has never, they're slowly trying to get there, but the NWSL kind of wants to be that, and so there's a difference, I think. And that's why maybe they were more incentivized to kind of concede to these things or make it more like it is in Europe or whatever. So I don't really see it happening too quickly with an MLS. I mean, they kind of phased out the college draft a little bit already, where now it's more of a draft for the MLS Next Pro teams, which is like a second team, where most of those guys kind of are signed to that team instead of just the first team right away. And, other things like the trade things, I don't really see that happening quickly, but hopefully, I think our collective bargaining agreement is still going for a couple more years. So hopefully we can kind of make some strides towards that. And hopefully, honestly, it provides a really good blueprint and a good example of, of kind of how this league can now attract better players, attract more players, and keeping more players, not having to, kind of get rid of the good players, all those things. So it can be a good example for MLS to adopt these types of rules, that we can have that type of freedom too.
Kind of the modernization of it all. But there is one more thing to point out in this entire process, and that MLS also has a more entrenched bureaucracy and kind of group of owners that are more, I would say, unified and familiar with each other over a longer period of time. And they definitely have been known to wield the, Thor's hammer at times to try and bend what they want MLS to be to their will. So by no means does this mean MLS is about to just do away with a lot of the things that make MLS particularly quirky, but it does mean that somebody in the US has taken huge steps in that direction. And I think it is inevitable, even if it takes quite some time, that it will happen with MLS too, eventually.
Let's hope we get there. And hopefully maybe even at the next negotiations, where I was part of them a little bit the last time around. It was during COVID, so it was obviously tough to really negotiate a lot. And now hopefully that might be different. I think our CBA ends right around the World Cup or just after, so we're going to be like every negotiation, we're going to be looking at trying to make significant strides in terms of player freedoms, player salaries, all these types of things.
And I think that is an excellent timing on the negotiation, because after that World Cup, it'll probably be the strongest negotiating position for the MLS players, I would imagine, considering the explosion of everything around the league that people are kind of anticipating. But we will see. It's going to be an exciting thing to follow, like one of those slow burns over the next couple of years. Their deal, by the way, runs to 2030. So they got a 6-year deal done that locks all that in. But yeah, I don't expect any of that stuff to kind of vanish 6 years in the future. Speaking of the national team, though, with the World Cup stuff, I can't believe we haven't mentioned this, because it's been since our last podcast that this happened. But all reports are saying that the U.S. has identified its new manager. He hasn't been announced yet, but it is Mauricio Pochettino. If it somehow falls apart at this point, it would be catastrophic. But when I first saw this, and I'll just give you an insight into where I was, we were leaving the Grand Canyon, so I hadn't had a cell phone for a week. And when we went in, I knew that it was potentially going to happen. Like, the last headline I saw as I'm like dropping into the river for the first time is Pochettino in intense talks with the U.S. national team. We get in the car, we get connected. It takes a little driving to get any cell service. I'm driving, my brother's next to me. The first question I ask him after a week without cell service is, Google Pochettino. Did it happen? And then of course it comes back and it had been, all but confirmed by the sources and everything. So my reaction was obviously intense excitement. What did you think when you saw that name pop up for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I was somewhat, I don't know. I mean, honestly, it's really tough for me to really give a proper way of how I was feeling. I mean, it was, I think he's a good coach. I think he was a good coach. I think he is a good coach. I think he has the right pedigree. I don't think he's too big. He's not all about himself. I think he's really there about trying to, get the best out of a group of guys that, want to do well, I think, at the World Cup. And then that's something, I'm kind of relieved about, that it's not this super high profile manager that kind of makes it more about himself, of taking this huge job to bringing the US to new heights and all these things. I feel like Pochettino would be a good guy to kind of, just be even keel, like, emotionally in control, a guy that just wants the best for the World Cup, and that's, I think, something really positive. If that's going to be him, I mean, I'm guessing it's going to be him now. So
no, they kind of, the story kind of broke like 2 weeks ago, but it's still not confirmed. But it is. What did you get a chance to watch maybe his Tottenham sides or his Chelsea side, or I guess his PSG side as well? Kind of get an idea of how he plays and how that might match up with the U.S. team.
You might know this better than me, honestly. I don't really have too much of an answer, to be honest with you. And but I think he's a manager that doesn't really have this like one way. If
I would agree with correctly. You. No, I'd agree with you.
Where I think he's good because he can hopefully get the best out of the player pool, right? At what is at hand, and then that, I think, might play might play positively in a national team setting, where if you had a coach that only plays 4-3-3, only plays the counter press, only or is only about possession, like, if you don't have the players for it, then you can't really do it, in my opinion. So, and that is different where you can't buy players, right? You can't just go out there and buy a $50 million center back that has amazing feet that can play out of everything, like, you can't do that. And here at the national team. So I think he's certainly going to evaluate, I think, the pool. He's going to, try and get as many guys in, get as many eyes on guys as possible. And I'm a little bit disappointed that it didn't happen before this window now, to kind of have him get started, right? Where we talked about that, I think, before in an episode, where we wanted, this window not to be wasted, in a sense. I don't think it'll be wasted, but it's certainly, not done. And it's different if the head coach is there or not. And so I think that's what he's going to be. He's going to be a manager that is able to evaluate and then put out a team, or put out a way of playing that best fits that group of guys that he thinks will do the best.
Yeah, he's a team builder. I couldn't have said it much better. So I'm just used to deferring to you when it comes to things that are actually happening on the field. But no, he has proven himself at the points that he has stopped at to be a team builder. He is also somebody who seems to eventually kind of wear out his welcome. And what that tells me is that he is also not uncomfortable telling players what he really thinks of what they're doing or what they're capable of, which in some scenarios, in a national team as well, like obviously underachieved at Copa America, is probably not the worst thing in the world. He's not afraid to take the bold stand and make those changes. And obviously, with his pedigree coming into the U.S., he'll have great license to do what he thinks is best. You could end up with some of that kind of, if you've ever seen the movie Miracle about the ice hockey team from 1980, where he just hands a sheet in and says, "This is my team." And, a few names are on it that maybe people don't see coming, but that's just the group of guys that he wants. I think we could run into stuff like that. But like you said, we don't have the opportunity to see that in this window. Instead, it's Mikey Varas, who's the U.S. under-20s coach. He's the guy that's going to take over for a match against Canada on the 7th in Kansas City. And I have to agree with you. And I know we talked about this on the podcast before. This has got to be a wasted window. And there's just no way that it's not a wasted window because according to reports, Varas is in line to be a coach in MLS. So it's not like he's going to be a part of the staff either. If you're a player and you're looking at that, I mean, as a fan, I'm looking at that and saying, okay, well, whoever he calls up and however they play and however they perform is going to have nothing to do with the next year and a half. As a player, are you looking at it kind of the same way?
A little bit, but I mean, you still put on the crest and you still put on, the jersey, and you just got kicked out of a Copa America at home that in the group stage where you didn't do well. So, and now you have this new coach coming in, so you just got called up to the national team. You hope that maybe there was a little bit of a conversation between Varas and Pochettino if he's going to be the guy. Or indirectly through other channels, within US soccer of who to call up. And but I'm looking at guys like Aiden Morris, for example, a guy that hasn't really been part of a full senior call up, like that, where all the European guys are there. Like guys like that, they're licking their chops right now. We're like, hey, I'm in camp. Like this is amazing. This is my shot to really prove. And after a disappointing showing at a Copa America, guys that have maybe were there are a little bit more on edge, like we talked about before with the new coach coming in. Guys that are coming in new are a little bit more like, all right, let's go. So I do expect that they're not just gonna sit there and be like, oh well, here we are, and this is whatever, and now the next time it counts. No, I think the mindset will be different. It's something that you have 2 years to get ready for a World Cup, and or less than that, and that is something that I think guys will certainly be looking at from now on all the way until then. And every time you represent the US and every time you get called into camp, I think it'll be very, very important. So I don't really think it's going to be a wasted window, even though Varas might not be part of the staff. He was part of my staff when I was at the national team camp once, and he was a really good guy to work with. I think he did a tremendous job, obviously, with the U20s. And if he becomes the San Diego FC head coach, then it's a great opportunity for him. And what a great opportunity this is for him as well. So I think he's going to want to make the most out of this too, and get a lot of experience out of it. And but again, I don't think it'll be a wasted window in that much of a sense. I do wish that the head coach that was going to be there for the next couple of years was in charge now already, but it's not the case for whatever reason.
Yeah, if best I understand, by the way, as I have that second channel, Zealandism, where I kind of dig into these topics and just ramble on. It has to do with his kind of buyout from Chelsea. So obviously, when he was released, he had a couple years left on his contract. So there's a lot of legalese going on in terms of how much the U.S. is going to pay and how much Chelsea is going to pay. And I'm sure the only person that is definitely getting paid 100% are the lawyers trying to figure out who is going to be paying what. But that seems to be what the holdup is, at least from the reporting that I've managed to get my hands on. If you're wondering why, the future manager of the U.S. national team seems to just be waiting in the wings of his own introduction for weeks. But I think you hit on something else that I just kind of breezed over. But if you're Mikey Varas, I mean, this is just an insane opportunity to manage the U.S. national team in one window and maybe a rising star in the U.S. managerial scene. I mean, he is not an old guy, but he is somebody that even for somebody like me that follows the sport obviously avidly, I had to look up how to pronounce his name before we started this podcast, right? Like he is now introduced to the larger like US soccer audience for the first time as a guy that is in line to potentially have a job like this one day, because obviously Pochettino is not going to be around forever. And I would imagine that Mikey Varas, if he can have a good window and say produce a win with with this masterstroke of including certain players against Canada, then that will stick in the minds of the people that make those sorts of decisions for a long time.
Yeah, just see what happened to BJ Callahan, right? He was
exactly, yeah.
He's the head coach of Nashville now. Obviously, they're having a tough time there at the moment, but he got that job because of kind of what he's done. One as an assistant within U.S. soccer, and two at the time he was the head coach or the interim head coach. At the Gold Cup and all these other places, and those other games. So yeah, definitely something to kind of keep in mind as well.
Yeah, just lost in the shuffle. Oh, yeah, the guy that is stepping in to coach this. It's a pretty big deal for him, too. Loyal listeners of the Player Manager podcast, as always, you can send us questions on Instagram at Player Manager Pod, but I've got some bad news for you. You've been skipped in line this week because our producer, Michael, has a question that he wanted to ask. Then he has taken that spot, and the question is to you, Julian. Is Atlanta United have parted ways with longtime technical director Carlos Bocanegra. What's going on in Atlanta? And how can they turn the clock back to the good old days when Julian Gressel and the boys were winning a title?
I'm the wrong guy to ask that, but yeah, I saw the news today as well, and obviously they had made some changes with Garth Lagerwey coming in from Seattle after Darren Eales had left, who was a great president when I was there. Carlos had been there since the beginning, and he's obviously, he's getting, he has to take some, or is getting credit for putting together a championship team in the first place and kind of being there, getting everything off the ground running. And I think that's obviously been faded a little bit over the last couple of years, where, playoff appearances have, or success in general hasn't really been there. So I guess it's just maybe Garth looking at it in a way where he's trying to, see what he can change and how he can change things. But again, I think Carlos has done a good job, especially early on. And I think back then he was never really in management before, so it's also a tough job to kind of just get thrown into. So. Yeah, certainly interesting to see what's going to happen there. I know, obviously, our GM here, Chris Henderson, he was with Garth Lagerwey in Seattle for a long time, where they were really successful during that time. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens coming this offseason and what they're going to do in Atlanta, because, Atlanta is still in my heart. I've had such a good time there. We obviously won a championship there, and that was really my first step in my career, where I've made a name for myself in this league, with Tata together. But if it wasn't for a guy like Carlos who drafted me, I would never be in this position. So, we'll kind of see how it's going. I'm certainly watching, and like I said, Atlanta is still near and dear to my heart and means a lot to me. But yeah, I'll be watching. Is there anything? Are you going to apply?
Am I going to apply? I mean, I do. My face ends up in the replies of tweets like that all of the time, just like pictures of my face. So can't wait for that one to drop. But I was, one, please stop. I definitely can't do these jobs in real life. And two, you do play at Atlanta United, obviously, on September 18th. So be able to check up on everybody and how they're doing. And they are actually still in the hunt for the playoffs. They are in ninth, which is like that last kind of, playoff position. But it, like you said, had been kind of rotting out for a long time. And that fan base, obviously, when you start out as hot as they did, you expect a certain level of performance that just hasn't been there over the last couple of years. And that absolutely Goliath Stadium. But Julian, it's time to get to the news that we teased at the top of the show.
Ooh, finally.
Yes.
Finally.
I know you've been listening to our dulcet tones for months and months as a listener of this podcast, and we appreciate you dearly for that. And this is almost something to thank you with. You are now going to be able to watch our faces at the same time, because we are coming to YouTube. Many of you have been asking when we're going to be on YouTube. The answer is very soon, because next week's show will be uploaded on YouTube. And that's it's going to be Player Manager Podcast. So youtube.com/@Player Manager Podcast, because you have ats on YouTube now, apparently. It is up now. You can go subscribe to it and hit the bell and everything. I'm obviously going to include that in a few YouTube videos as well, so that people know that it's there and know that it's going on. But we will be uploading every podcast from the next one on YouTube. We're famous now.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Now I'm going to have to dress up and kind of get my hair right and all these things. You're a pro at this, but this is completely new for me. So we'll do well. I'm excited. This is going to be fun.
I'm a pro at this. I think I get to be on camera so much that I kind of just gave up a long time ago. Unless I get a text from my mom that's like, you need to fix your hair. And I'm like, you're right, Mom. I'm sorry. And I will fix my hair for the podcast because we're a professional podcast. I think I just hurt my hand. This is real mahogany. And if you hit that bell, by the way, on YouTube, you will get a notification every time the podcast goes live on YouTube. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Be sure to review it and rate it wherever you're listening to this podcast, anywhere you happen to be. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on YouTube.